Today's episode is sponsored by the Christian Standard Bible. The goal of the CSB is to be faithful to the original languages without sacrificing clarity, all the while maintaining both accuracy and readability. With beautiful designs and multiple study Bible options, everyone, from adults to teens to children, can find a CSB Bible that they enjoy. Learn more at csbible.com.
Welcome to Real Talk Christian Podcast, where we drink coffee and have real conversations on faith, culture, and society. This is Mark Hyde.
And Chris Fuller.
And on today's episode of Real Talk Christian Podcast, we're talking about why mega church pastors fail. It seems like over the last few years, we've seen a lot of them fall, churches imploded, and people are starting to now ask the question, why? Fuller, you ready to jump in?
Let's go.
Good morning, young sir.
Good morning. What? It's morning?
It's morning.
Holy cow.
People are listening to this in the morning, and for the first time, I think, ever.
I don't think
No. We've done a couple mornings in the beginning, but it was like 10 a.m.
Yeah. Not 7:30
showing up
in the
at
morning.
church at 7 a.m.
Yeah. Wow. We're like really dedicated to you guys.
I love it. Well, we're here bright and early. We got our coffee. We're drinking it. This is the first time we can drink coffee and not think to ourselves,
Wow,
I may not sleep tonight.
It's actually kind of nice because this is my second cup of coffee
Is
now.
it really?
It's like, yeah, I'm like, all right, I can keep on drinking because I got all day to stay up now.
And what do they say? It's like caffeine. It's like you're not supposed to drink it. Was it after 4 hours or 6 hours when caffeine's like half-life? You're not supposed to drink coffee after like 2?
I try not to drink coffee anymore since I've had all my heart issues past noon.
Past noon.
And
And that's a struggle for you because you
it
love
is.
your early
love
morning
coffee,
cup.
but my health is more important. So
I think Janelle would agree with.
She would.
And I struggle with that.
Every once in a while, like on Friday nights when we typically record, I'll have like a cup, and that's it. But that's why you only see me. Sometimes I won't drink it at all, and sometimes it'll be just.
Sometimes you won't even finish it.
Right. Exactly. So
you just want to start off with it.
It's part of the podcast experience.
And I want to say, not what I struggle with. I said that a second ago. I don't struggle with your health and you not choosing coffee over your health because you need to choose your health. But more the fact of I love coffee around 2. I don't know why. Like I go to Starbucks in the morning usually for work, and I drink.
You start to drag a little bit at 2.
And it's after lunch. I want to get back into my mojo. Get back into my work mojo, my work flow. And coffee, it's a good way to start off any sections because I kind of my work days are split into 2 different areas. One's the morning, and then one's after.
One's pre-lunch, one's post-lunch.
Well, not just that, but it's like I come home, I connect with our nanny, I get the kids down to bed, and then I get lunch for myself. And after that, it's been like an hour since I've been working.
Right.
And so it's like I gotta like rejuvenate. So
I hear you.
More coffee. So I mean, I probably should slow down that, and I probably should also slow down my Halloween candy intake.
Well,
because
by the time this episode drops, we're like almost to Christmas. So
that's true. Which fun fact? Have you been to Starbucks anytime recently?
I have not.
Christmas exploded in there.
I heard.
I wasn't there Thursday.
I saw your picture the other day.
And I saw your picture in my picture.
Yeah.
Because I almost took a picture. I was like, oh, wait, no, that's my work project. Here, let's bring up Fuller real quick.
Boop. Hello, Fuller.
But, I mean, I was there on Wednesday, and it was normal. Right. I was not there on Thursday. And I walk in on Friday, and everything in that store is red.
Like
red.
Christmas threw up in the store.
Christmas exploded. Like you walk in.
They forgot about Thanksgiving, went straight to Christmas.
Well, okay, so John Acuff, I love John Acuff. He has a post where it's like, all the people who get mad about us celebrating Christmas before Thanksgiving, he's like, tell me 5 good Thanksgiving songs.
Ooh.
Which, I mean, it's a lot of those hymns like, thank you, Lord. Like, thank you, Lord, for saving my soul.
Give thanks to the Lord, our God and King.
His love endures forever.
Now you guys know why we have real jobs.
That's why Soche is the worship pastor at Southside. But, we are getting close to Christmas. Right now, I think it's after Thanksgiving.
It is.
This episode is dropping.
I think we're a couple weeks before Christmas at this point. Sorry, we're unsure because it's like the Saturday after Halloween while we're recording right now.
Because we need to start talking about a Christmas giveaway.
We do.
We need to start talking about a Christmas giveaway. Give away a Christmas shirt or a hoodie or something like that. I think that'd be pretty dope.
I should make up a Christmas mug, an RTC Christmas mug.
Oh, I like that. Let's do that. Ooh. How about we name and claim it right now that we're going to give away an RTC Christmas mug.
We're going to give a RTC Christmas mug and a RTC Christmas coffee of some sort. I don't know what kind.
That means you got to roast again.
Well, if I don't have time to roast, we could always buy, and it'll just be some random coffee.
We can do a local from South Bend. You know?
Sure, from a local coffee shop or something like that. But we'll send you guys some sort of coffee to fill your coffee cup.
With the RTC Christmas coffee mug. That is dope.
That's going to be the giveaway for Christmas.
I like it. So we're giving away a Christmas coffee mug.
Christmas coffee mug.
I like it. Well, something we've been doing on the show for a while now. I wonder if we need to flip the script going into 2022 because we've been doing this or that questions for a while now.
We have.
And so
we've been doing Would You Rather.
We've been doing Would You Rathers. I mean, yeah, it's like,
so we did
this,
we did
or
question
this or
in a box.
Question in a box, yep.
And we did the Would You Rather, and now you want to go to this or that.
Well, I say this or that. I always say this or that because you choose this or that, which is either this or
would
this,
you rather. Okay.
or would you rather
so what do you want to do?
This. Let's keep doing the would you rather
through the
this
end
or
of the
that
year?
Or whatever through the end of the year,
and then we'll switch it up,
right? Because we want people, because obviously this is where it's hard, right? Like I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I don't feel like I know the people I'm listening to.
Sure.
So what I actually do is I go onto their website, I go on their social media, and I stalk them for a little bit to make sure they're not some Joe Schmo weird person or whatever. One person, I listened to her podcast because I started doing a course from her, and I'm like, I just give me all the wealth of wisdom. So it's like I'll listen to your podcast because I was connected with you already.
Right.
But if people just find the show, which lately a lot of people have been just randomly finding the show,
which is cool.
And if we want to speak into people's lives and have them reach out to us, we want people to know who we are too.
Yeah, definitely.
So you ready for this?
Let's dive into the Would You Rather. All right, so I got to preference this question a little bit, okay?
You got to preference it?
I got to no, that's not the right word.
In the euthanasia episode, I asked you if it was appropriate, so I'm going to ask you again, is it appropriate?
It's appropriate, but I have to, you have to be in the mindset of not the current business you're in, but when you were pastor at Southside. Okay. So would you rather let your parents access your browsing history or let your boss access your browsing history? Put it back in the time frame of...
I don't think it matters because my browsing history is just...
Mine is pretty clean too. It doesn't really matter who accesses it.
I mean, but I would probably say my mom because no matter what, I don't want to get fired.
Right. Yeah.
I'd say parents.
I would go with either or, but I'll go with parents because you're just saying parents. 44% say parents, 56% they would rather let their boss.
Wow.
Somebody's got something to hide from their mama and daddy.
You don't have from mama and daddy. I will say, though, whenever I was studying for certain sermon preps, I was like, I hope nothing gets triggered in this church's internet firewall where it's like, what is Mark looking up at church? I'm like, oh, shoot, I'm sorry. It's for a series. It's for a series.
He's in the book of Leviticus. What's he looking up bestiality for?
I was more like, he's in the book of Song of Solomon. What is he reading? Uh-oh.
Oh, yeah. All right. Would you rather, this is an easy one. I think that I don't even have to really ask this question, but for our listeners, I will. Would you rather watch Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad?
Neither.
Oh, I'd watch Breaking Bad all day long.
Can I put Madam Secretary in there?
No.
I mean, if I had to choose, I would say Breaking Bad.
Breaking Bad. Have you ever seen Breaking Bad? It's not a kid-friendly show. It's not a really good show, but out of the two choices and the whole series of it, it's got a good storyline.
And that's what I've heard. I've heard it's a good storyline, but I just couldn't. Like, I don't know. It seems a little like I've tried Blacklist, or I've tried getting myself to want to watch Blacklist, but it's just so dark, man.
It's like The Sopranos. I can't get into The Sopranos.
No, like, I mean, if it's too dark, it's more the fact of I know how that affects my thoughts.
Okay, you know, just real quick before we go to the last Would You Rather, but lately, Piper and I she's really gotten into it, but we've started the whole season binge watching of Family Matters. Remember Family Matters from the
Steve
80s?
Urkel?
Yeah.
Oh,
she absolutely just sits there and cracks up at the show the entire time.
And you are here for it.
Which makes me laugh at the show and at her because of how hardcore she's laughing at Steve Urkel. And
was that 80s or was that 90s when that came out?
89 when it came out.
Okay.
And it ran through the 90s. Part of the 90s.
I remember watching that as a kid, like before school.
Yeah. So the best part about it, though, is that Piper goes, "Daddy?" I go, "Yeah." She goes, "I want to be Piper Urkel." I said, "You know what? Steve's a real nice young man. You go for it."
And that's it. By the end of the show, you're like, man,
I like
Steve is just a good dude.
Steve is my boy, man.
Steve is a good dude.
Well, and then I told my father-in-law and I were talking about it, and I go, as a kid, I remember growing up saying, I wish Carl Winslow was my father.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Because Carl was such a cool dad. Like, even though he was kind of weird, he was like such a cool,
he was
family-minded.
goofy, of course.
Yeah.
But he loved his wife.
Exactly.
He loved his kids.
Right, and he always wanted the best for his kids, and he wasn't overly, like, crazy on his kids.
And the episode I remember from that show specifically is when his son got pulled over, and it was because he was a black kid in a white neighborhood, and it's like that was back in the 80s. And I remember the talk that he gave, and it was one of those talks where it's like, look, the world's going to be hard,
right?
And that's just the fight you have to fight. But we need to change it from not this way, but we need to change it in this way,
right?
Which I thought was really cool. So I remember that conversation. I remember the conversation with Will Smith when he was talking about his dad in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air
with
and
Uncle Phil.
with Uncle Phil.
Oh man, I started to cry.
And he was talking about his dad and why his dad left him and all these different
Yeah.
things. And Uncle Phil gave him a big hug. And then I read later that was
emotion.
That was him talking about his real dad,
Yeah, that was
not
all
the show
emotion.
dad.
Yeah.
And it's just like, man, you see these shows back in the 80s and 90s, or even like Full House.
They don't make shows like that anymore.
Like the conversations that
Well,
they
and
would
they-
have with their kids, like with,
and they talked about the hard issues.
Uh-huh.
But they did it in such a way that was like, I don't know. It was just very wholesome. It
Now-
wasn't like in your face with all the gruesome. It was like we're going to explain it out, but it's going to be in a way that's not too far out there.
Exactly, but it's right where kids and teenagers need to have those conversations.
Right,
Well,
exactly.
rather than shoving it down throat, let's just
Right.
Let's actually have a conversation, record the conversation,
Rather
as
than
if-
throwing
yeah.
all the grotesque things out
yep.
about the things. It's, hey, this is we need to. Yeah, they're talking to a specific age range, and they did a very good job with those shows doing that.
No, I think Fuller House, like they still tried to do it, but man,
They're too trashy for
but
me now.
they try to have these heart-to-heart conversations. I'm like, man, there ain't nothing like a dating conversation or Uncle Joey.
Yeah, but even now, when they have those actors back on the show, then it's not the same.
It's not the same.
They're that whole.
I do enjoy
relationship.
Fuller House, but it ain't Full House. But those shows from the 90s, man, 80s, 90s,
they hit
Family
good.
Matters. I mean, even Different Strokes.
Hey, even
I enjoyed
Friends.
some Different Strokes.
Even Friends or Seinfeld. Those were all funny,
I've only
hilarious.
seen like maybe 3 episodes of Seinfeld.
Bro,
We're not friends anymore, are we?
bro.
I don't watch The Office.
I don't watch The
I
Office.
thought you were an Office guy.
No, that's Janelle.
Janelle. Okay, Beth is a big Office guy.
I'm just not.
Office girl and Parks and Rec.
I'm an office girl in an office world.
Oh goodness.
All
Okay,
right.
so what's this last one?
All right, last one, and then we'll move on here since we're at 12 minutes.
We'll talk
already,
about the
13.
coffee after this.
Would you rather have a face that everyone laughs at or have a name that everyone laughs at?
Definitely name.
Well, I've got both. Everybody laughs at me. No matter.
No, nobody laughs at you.
I would say both are horrible choices, so I'll go with you. 87% say they would rather have a name that everyone laughs at rather than a face.
Well, it's like, the name is just whatever. Like, your name is your name. Like I think in the NBA, like, there's so many players' names that they just get razzed for their names, or NFL, they get razzed for their names. And, a name's a name. But if it's because of your face, I'm like, I feel like that's a little bit more personal. And it's something you can't change.
Right.
Like, your face is your face. And that's just not cool. But so how many people, what was the percentage? Like up in the 80s, you said, or something like that?
Yeah, 83%.
83.
Sorry, I'm responding to one of our guests right now that we're going to be interviewing in a little
good.
while.
Hey, while you do that, I'm going to read the review for the week. So this one dates back to October 23rd, and we have not ran out of reviews in a while. So all you guys are awesome. Thank you. So this is from S.T. Sweeney. So I'm guessing that's the name, but S.T. Sweeney says, "Great work. I started listening to your podcast over the last few weeks and has helped me through some of the biggest questions and brought me much clarity and joy. I've shared this with my fiance, and now we listen together as well as my parents. Thank you for great discussions and content, helping me grow closer in my pursuit of being a better disciple of Jesus." Well, S.T. Sweeney, appreciate it, but I'm not going to say a gender, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate you.
So reach out to us. We've said this in the last few episodes, but Janelle said she would take over making sure that those mini swag bags get shipped out.
You have to send us your information
Yep.
in order for that to happen. We are not clairvoyant. We can't just, hey, we know. We don't know.
Speaking of sending us their information, did you know I sent someone our information?
I saw that.
There's a listener. My phone's over there, so I can't pull the name out of the top of my head. It's way over there. But we are having coffee shipped to us from Virginia.
I think that was Insta.
It's Instagram. Yeah, it was Instagram. Which I do have to say, a lot of you guys have been reaching out over texting, phone calls. We called a listener recently. You guys been sending us a lot of emails and a lot of DMs, and we cannot be more appreciative of it. We always say it. We want to continue the conversation offline, and you guys have forced us to do that, and we are thankful, and we are here for it.
James Williamson.
There it is. I was thinking it was something with a J, but I was going to say Jimmy, so I'm glad it's James.
James Williamson.
James is sending us coffee from Virginia.
We appreciate
I am
it.
here for it, and I am excited. But before we start the conversation, we got to talk about the coffee.
Okay, so the coffee
This is not our sponsored coffee.
It's not sponsored coffee because, well, Mark.
That's next episode.
I told Mark about a coffee last week, and he's like, I got to try it. So I'm like, all right, I'll bring it next week.
But when you say that there's such a thing as good Costco coffee, I don't believe you.
Well, that's what I thought, too. When Janelle brought this bag home, I'm like, there's...
Like, why would you waste your money?
Like seriously,
dear, why would you waste your money?
I am truly a coffee snob, and it has to taste good, or else I just refuse. I will not drink any coffee if it is not good coffee.
I've thrown some coffee away recently.
I will spew it out of my mouth. If it is not
Mr.
good
Lukewarm.
coffee.
Okay, Mr. Lukewarm.
I will not. There's been times where, well, it's like every time we tried like a coffee
Those
drink,
weird, gross
and it's like
ones,
I won't
yeah.
even drink it. If it's Aldi flavored coffee, brand coffee, I take a sip and I go nope, and I dump it right down the drain. I just will not drink it. I don't know why. My taste buds have changed, and I just can't stomach anymore. It makes me physically sick to drink bad coffee.
Yep.
But Janelle brought home a Mayan blend from Costco, and it's organic. It's a blend of Honduran, Guatemalan, and Mexican coffee,
Which is like all of our favorites. Besides Peru. Peru's not thrown in there because we love Peru.
right.
But these are my favorites.
But this is a good batch of blend, and I'm not typically a blend guy either. But it's a medium roast, and it is phenomenal.
It is phenomenal.
I went to Costco the other day to buy another bag. It was so good. I'm like,
did you really?
And then so I was talking it up at work, where the rest of my coffee snobs live, and they're like, all right, yeah, right. I'm like, no, let me bring some in for you to try. And so I brought some in. They're like, wow, for store-bought coffee, this is really good coffee. I was like, I know, right?
It's really good.
Really good
like
stuff.
It's smooth, but this is a good morning sipping coffee. I always joke about what time of day to drink it, because like my favorite time to drink our coffee from Brew It Forward, depending on the brew, the Costa Rican that I have right now is perfect right after lunch. After lunch is perfect.
That's how I feel about the Peruvian coffee.
Okay.
From Brew It Forward, is that it's a good after lunch, like, pick me up.
Yep, it's phenomenal. But
or like the end of the workday, like if I was going to have a cup of coffee.
Beth and I have been spending money on good decaf lately because we've been having decaf a lot at night.
Barf.
You can get good decaf. You just got to find it. You got to pay for it. I want coffee at night.
That's like sugar-free candy. Well, we're buying sugar-free candy. It's like, no, it's not the same.
It's not, but I want to go to bed and I want to drink coffee at 11 o'clock at night.
I would just say I don't need to drink. I'll drink a cup of tea.
But needless to say, this coffee is very good, my friend. So, Janelle, thank you for finding us this coffee.
Thank you, Janelle.
But before we move on, Brew It Forward Coffee Co., brewitforwardcoffeeco.com.
They're the official sponsor.
They're the official sponsor. So even though we're not drinking it, we got to talk about them because they are amazing people, Jared and Marianne. In fact, I just found a video where someone interviewed like Jared, him doing the process of roasting the beans. So I got to get my hands on that video and share it with our listeners too.
Yeah, definitely.
But like the love that he has in the machine. I mean, the machine literally is run off of like stereotypical analog stuff where he's controlling the temperatures and the spins and the stuff. But then he has his computer right next to him doing stuff with it too.
You're trending and tracking.
I'm like, this man's got a deep love for his coffee. He really does. And he takes great care of it, great appreciation, and so much so that he wants to roast it and ship it in the same day, get it to you within 2 or 3 days of it brewing or of it roasting. So that way when you brew it,
it's
fresh as all get out. And all the proceeds go to help foster kids and halfway houses and other ministries that just help kids and honestly teenagers, young adults that are just down and out.
Right.
So it's a great ministry. It's a great partnership. If you use the coupon code RTC, you get 10% off just a bag of coffee. If you get the subscription, you can't use RTC. But we recommend the subscription because you get free shipping. You're paying basically, $1 per pound of coffee, and you get a different origin every single month. It's like $18 for 16 pounds. Or 16 ounces, right?
You're talking $1 per ounce.
But I said $1 per pound, didn't I?
I was like,
that's cheap.
I was like, wait, what?
So you get $1 per ounce, basically, which is a phenomenal deal, and you don't even have to think about it. Coffee just shows up on your doorstep
every month.
Every month. You subscribe to Netflix, you subscribe to Amazon Prime, you subscribe to Hulu. Why not subscribe for your coffee at brewitforwardcoffeeco.com? That was a good commercial.
We got to come up with a jingle for it now.
We do. We need to come up with something for them.
Anyways,
but anywho, dude,
20 minutes in. Let's dive into the conversation.
I apologize, all the people. So today, hopefully, I don't know if this will be a long conversation now. We're going to find out.
Well, it's got to be semi-short because we only have like 30-ish minutes before we need to be done now.
Let's go, because we have a really cool interview lined up for the next episode. But So there's a podcast that I've been listening to, and I have been subscribed to it since they dropped the trailer, which was like months before they dropped the first episode, and it was called The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. And so if you guys don't know the history of Mars Hill Church up in Seattle, Pastor Mark Driscoll is the lead pastor up there. Long story short, it grew in leaps and bounds in just handful of years. We're talking tens of thousands of people in one of the most unchristian cities in the most one of the most I was talking with a buddy of mine who lives in California, and everyone in California looks at the people who live in Washington State and they go, "No, we ain't the crazy ones. They the crazy ones." And so he started a church in Seattle, Washington, one of the most unreached cities in all of America. That's super big and super liberal, and they started a church there, and it just grew in leaps and bounds. And they were one of the first churches to get their sermons online. So people started listening to their sermons all over the place. Before he was even 30 years old, he had one of the largest churches in the nation that started with a Bible study of like 6 people. And he started Acts 29 Network, which was a church planning network, was starting conferences, starting ministries. Their worship team was par none. The song Grace Alone that we sing in church was written by his worship team. And it was a thriving, bumping church. In fact, even when I was, forming my theology, when I was in undergrad and coming out of undergrad, Mark Driscoll played a big part in the theology that I studied. And he wrote a theology book. He wrote a book called Real Marriage, where him and his wife actually got very explicit, and they weren't just trying to do the whole, just love your spouse. They're like, no, we're going to get explicit, and we're going to tell you all these different things, which made some people uncomfortable. But, at the end of the day, people loved, from afar, loved how real and vulnerable and raw this man was. Like, he loved Jesus. He had his issues, but that's okay. Well, a handful of years ago, the church literally imploded overnight, where all of a sudden he got fired, and the reason was because he was a jerk and just was a bully and a tyrant and all these different things. And so one week they walk in, Rick Warren did one of the final sermons of the church. Mark Driscoll then gave a speech, and this like a handful of weeks later, the elders walked up and said, Mars Hill Church is no more. Every single location that's all across America is now a single autonomous location. Mars Hill churches were coming together to be like, okay, we need to come together and be a church because we're still both church plants, so let's come together and make our own church and have our own local pastor. And all of a sudden, people ask the question of, how do you go from one of the largest churches in America, one of the most powerful teaching ministries in all of America, to being fired, the church closed its doors, and everything was shut down overnight? Like, what on earth happened? And so this whole podcast isn't just talking about the church specifically, but behind the scenes of interviewing different people that were close with Mark and other things like that, and then asking the question of, how does a church that is baptizing people, like that church that has baptized more people than some entire denominations have over the last handful of years? And so how's a church that seems to be on fire for Jesus, doing amazing things in the city, in people's lives, self-destruct and implode? Why did this leader all of a sudden get fired, and what were the characteristics behind that, and how were people affected by it? And then out of that, we see so many other pastors falling right now. I mean, we've seen, we don't necessarily need to name names, but even in our own denomination, we've seen some amazing pastors with amazing platforms in ministry that they're no longer pastors, or they were fired from their churches and then they were gone for a little bit, then started new church plants or whatever. But the question is why do mega pastors or mega church pastors keep falling and keep failing and their churches implode? And then I think that's not just the main question, but I think the real question is more the fact of, why do pastors keep failing and falling in their lives and ministries implode? And so before we jump into the conversation, I want to start with a quote by a guy, Kerry Newhoff, kerrynewoff.com. I think it's leadlikeneverbefore.com is the other way to get to his website and whatnot. And he was, again, a small little local church pastor of like 75 people, and then they went to 300, and then they exploded to like 10 times that. And they're in Canada, which is not, Canada's not like America when it comes to religious matters, especially outside of Toronto. And so all of a sudden he wrote this book and about how the things that can destroy a leader, because there are things that destroyed him. And he was burnt out. He was ready to quit the ministry. He's ready to do all these different things, and a whole lot of Jesus and hundreds of hours in therapy is what he said is what got him back on track. But he said that it's way too easy for your platform to outgrow your character. And that's where the danger lies. And, you know, a lot of pastors nowadays, and maybe this is where we should start the conversation of so many pastors nowadays, including, I struggled with this too, of, you know, you're on a stage, you're teaching, you're getting the claps, you're getting the pat on the back, but then you look around on Instagram and on Facebook and on YouTube, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, so this dude has over 1 million followers on YouTube. This dude's flying a private jet. This dude wrote a book. This guy has a film crew that just follows him around all day for Instagram content and for Instagram stories and whatnot. And all of a sudden you see these pastors who are now all of a sudden not just a local church pastor, but they are a national and global phenomenon, like both in the Christian and in the secular world. And I think the question is that we need to have the conversation of what is the role of the pastor? Should we desire to be a megachurch pastor? Should we desire to have platforms? Should we listen to sermons of people who are megachurch pastors? And just what should we do out of all of this? Because people are having the conversation of if megachurches are, a lot of them are like this, and does a lot of the pastors act like this, is that the right way to do church? You know, and so I think, I don't know, I don't necessarily know where I want the conversation to go. I don't have outlines, I don't have points, I just have a whole bunch of verses and thoughts and questions. So I'm going to toss it your way and just ask you the question. Well, to go back and forth, I've asked the question of, is having this celebrity pastor mindset with a platform, like, is that an okay desire for someone to even have?
I think the Bible is pretty specific about wanting to have your own glory and your own honor and where that leads, right? I didn't even think I was going to pull these scriptures out so quick since you asked the question. So there comes an aspect where you don't glorify yourself. Jeremiah 9:23-24 says, this is what the Lord says. So this isn't what Jeremiah says. This is what the Lord says. The wise person should not boast in his wisdom. The strong should not boast in their strength. The wealthy should not boast in their wealth. But the one who boasts should boast in this, that he understands and knows me, that I am the Lord, showing faithful love, justice, and righteousness on earth, for I delight in these things. This is the Lord's declaration. So if you're going into it trying to be a celebrity pastor or a influencer or a platform reformist, whatever you want to call it, and that's your mindset going into it, I think as a Christian, you're going into it for the wrong reason. If you're going into it because you've been called by the Lord to go into it, and you're just going being a faithful servant, not caring about what you become, because you know that, hey, me looking at myself becoming something is an act of pride, and I should never want people to look at me. I should always redirect to look at God. Matthew 5:16 so talks about this. Those are the only reasons why I should go into any type of ministry. If I go into it looking to gain followers or have this big following or make millions of dollars, I'm in it for the wrong reason. Isaiah 64:6 says, all of us have become like something unclean, and all our righteous acts are like a polluted garment. Some say like filthy rags. This is where Jesus requotes it. Is this, all of us are like a leaf, and our iniquities carry us away like the wind. So left to our own devices, we're going to just blow away like the wind and let things overtake us, because we were never meant to go into anything saying it's for God, but really it's for ourselves.
And do you think this is a harder, I don't want to say sin, a harder temptation nowadays with the Instagram influencer culture and Facebook fans and all these different things?
I think it is. I think you and I have even talked about it for this podcast, that if it ever got to a point where I felt, and I can't speak for you, but if I felt like, hey, I'm losing the real meaning behind this podcast.
You said this from day one.
Right. If I feel like I'm in it for putting content out to get followers or listeners or anything like that, I will step down from this podcast. I mean, I can't speak for you. You got to do what you got to do. But for me, if I feel myself gaining too much pride from this, I will step away, because that's not what this podcast is for. This podcast is to help educate and have these real conversations with other Christians. We're having a conversation here, but we've had so many great conversations, and to glorify God. Never to point to our glory, but always to redirect to the glory of God. Every time we've talked to somebody through Instagram, Facebook, text message, email. That's always pretty much our typical response. Ones that, oh, you guys are great. It's like, well, it's not us, it's God. Like
there's one time
that's
that we, I mean, in one of the response, I still need to finish the response from it, where someone asked us, well, with the pro-life conversations, and I came back and said, well, this is what we do. This is what we're about.
Right.
And so, but having that line of look at us, 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 that's a hard thing to balance.
It is.
And I think that's where a lot of the struggle comes. And, going back to pastors with platforms, I don't think a lot of pastors got into, quote unquote, the pastor game because of it. Now, I will say, so our worship, I don't know if you know this story super well, but Brendan Prout, when he was here, the church he came from, the person that was the pastor of his church was a con man. Like, he got saved, quote unquote, this is his testimony. He got saved in prison because he was in prison, got locked up, got his life turned around, went to Sarah, did all these different things.
Sure.
And, the question, and then all of a sudden it finds out that he's embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars and doing all these different things. And the question is, okay, did you find Jesus and the temptation became too strong? Or did you literally con a church of thousands of people?
Right.
Like, really, what on earth happened?
Well,
but I don't think most pastors get into the quote unquote wanting to pastor because of it.
For the platform.
For the wrong reason. However, I think in today's culture, I think that's starting to change.
Well,
I really do.
I think so too, but let's talk historically, right?
Okay, yeah,
historically, I don't think there's been any pastor, preacher. I don't even think, honestly, and I could be wrong, but I don't think Benny Hinn got into it for wanting followers or this big, mega ministry originally. I don't think he did. I'd like to believe he didn't. I could be wrong. But for most pastors that I've seen that have become this, they've got small beginnings typically. And I would like to try to believe in the character of most of these men that maybe they had good character, or we think of Ravi Zacharias, and the end of his life and everything that's come out of what his ministry had become. I'd like to believe that he did not get into it for those reasons, for that power. I believe that I'd like to believe that they got into it for the right reason. I could be wrong. But I think my blanket statement is going to be that, no, I believe most pastors get into it for the right reasons, and then they are slowly deterred and carried away. And there's a mind shift.
And Kerry Newhoff said that too. And I didn't put his points from his blog where I got the quote from, but he said, why do so many megachurch pastors fail? And that's what I like about him, is he flipped to me and I, not them, not they.
Right.
And he said one of the things that caused him to struggle was it got too big, too fast, and I couldn't handle it anymore.
Right.
And that's what he said.
Well, and that's what I've told, like, Janelle. Janelle knows that, hey, she's got to watch out because I've said it on the show, I have pride. So if I start getting too prideful, she has to tell me, hey, watch it, because she's my lookout right now, right? And you're my lookout, and Brandon Soche is my lookout, and I've got different people looking at me going, hey, you're on the right track, or hey, no, you've taken it, you're gone somewhere else. And at that point, I got to step away, because now I'm doing more harm than good, because I'm glorifying myself rather than glorifying God. And I think that's the mindset that I know that you and I are in, but that's the mindset I wish all pastors would stay in, and have those safeguards put in place to say, hey, you're getting too prideful. Hey, you're looking at the following of yours rather than the following of Jesus.
And that's where, again, and Kerry Newhoff again mentions in his article, and this is a big thing about the podcast, was a lot of times we fall because we get so big that people don't speak into our lives anymore.
Right.
Like, I don't think I will ever get to a point where you won't speak truth into me.
I hope not.
No.
And I hope the same for you to me.
Right. But you're a lot better at it than I am. And that's why we're that great of friends, is we've had times where you've had to come at me and be like, bro, this is not okay.
Right.
Like, we got to figure this out. And we did.
Right.
And I feel like, and I don't want to say I feel like, I know this for a fact. Part of the, going back to Mark Driscoll and the podcast, and what Kerry Newhoff was saying, is the fact of when you become so big that no one can call out your sins, that's a problem.
Right.
And a lot of times what pastors will do, and this is one reason why, not to elevate Scott, but our pastor did this. He was a solo pastor at this church. And he said, I was talking with him a few years ago, and I said, because we were having some issues with people coming at him and thinking that he wants to have power control and all these different things. And I'm like, has it always been like this? Have people always threatened that you want to have a, for lack of a better word, I'm the top dog and nobody else matters? And he goes, No, that's why I said we need an elder team. He said for, I don't know how many years before they had it, like maybe 12 years. He goes, I was a solo pastor. I was the only one who did anything. Not I did anything. That's not true. But in terms of leading and directing the church, it was just him. There might have been someone else on staff. There might have been, that there was a worship or a youth pastor before me, and they were doing their own direction as well. But he's like, I was a solo pastor. For lack of a better word, he didn't answer to anybody.
Right.
And now, and he was like, that's not okay. That's not safe. So we have the elder board that if he says, hey, I think we want to do this. I've been in those meetings where they're like, no. That's that's not the direction we need to go. Or if Scott's like, hey, this is what I want to do with the situation, they're like, that might be a prideful response. Maybe we should go in this regard. Because, in a multitude of counselors, there's safety. And Scott wanted that for himself. And a lot of times, and in the podcast, the Mars Hill one, the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, Mark Driscoll gave a sermon basically about Nehemiah, which we just recently talked about, the sword and the trial type thing. Yeah. And anyone who goes against the mission, it's either get on the bus or get off, and there's a whole lot of bodies behind the Mars Hill bus. But look what we're doing for Jesus. So either get on the bus or we're running you over. Right. And if you start to want to change the direction of the ministry, the vision, mission, purpose, you're done. Like, we will throw you off the bus. And so they went to him and say, we're seeing some things that aren't good. They got axed.
Right.
Like, they got literally axed. Like, they walked into a meeting where they thought it was fine, then all of a sudden, it's not okay.
Well, and not to sound
and we're not trying to hate on one person.
Not to sound like I'm defending them either. Mm-hmm. But there is a point where we have to watch for dissension. Right? We know that the Scripture speaks upon.
And this wasn't dissension either.
Right. And so there's a fine line between dissension and then, hey, we're just power hungry and going to put everybody under our thumb. And that's why I said I'm not defending Mark Driscoll's church at all or the ministry. But the fact that just because a eldership board, if you come to the pastor and you go, I got this problem with you, and they go, well, we're not going to do that. That doesn't mean that, hey, they're of the Mark Driscoll ministry mindset of its power. There's also, hey, we have to look out for everybody else.
And I struggle with that. Right. And because, even in our church, let's say this is probably the easiest example that any church ever has to deal with. The music style and the music volume, right? I don't feel like our church has worship wars right now. I feel like we have volume wars is really what it is. And because, for us, we've been sitting where we sit because
it's better.
It's the best speaker in the house.
It's close to the best speaker.
We know
it's the best speaker out of all the speakers, and we sit the closest to it, so we get the volume.
Right. And I don't want to say that that's the best way to go about it either, but it's more the fact of when we were at two services and we had second service was more for a lot more of the younger people showed up, and most that were a little older went to first. The music wasn't so loud that it hurt. It was just full. The music was full. And so, but
it was at a good level.
It was at a good level. But now we have these fights back and forth. And at what point do a pastor says, this is what we're doing, so get on board or get off?
Well,
or how do you love someone and say, this is the direction of the church? Because yes, we want to care about you individually.
Sure.
But at the same token, we need to care about
the whole body.
The whole body. So if the whole body wants, and you don't like it, how can we help you through this?
I don't think a pastor should ever use the phrase get on board or get run over or get off. Mm-hmm. I think that's a poor choice of words. I get the philosophy and the meaning behind it, which I can semi get behind, but I think those are the wrong words to use in that type of situation. I think the better phrase to use is, well, we have to work together to find a middle ground. Mm-hmm. And with the volume war, okay, they want it this soft, they want it this loud, it's going to go to the middle ground. Well, Pastor, it's still too loud. Look, it's the middle ground. Pastor, it's still too soft. Look, it's the middle ground. It's the middle ground it's the best for the entire church. Everybody has to compromise a little bit.
And that's even hard because you got volunteers who every volunteer runs it a little different. And then how do you tell a volunteer this is what it needs to be or you can't serve any? I'm not saying that's the conversation you need to go into.
And you don't even have to say that. It's just, hey, this is the volume that we as a leadership team have decided is best for the church. Please keep it to this. Mm-hmm. And then
a good servant would be able
to. And then if they're not a good servant and they keep bumping it up or bumping it down, then the eldership team needs to talk to them, and then has to start becoming a real conversation.
So let's lean into this a little bit, where we talk about the church as an institution, as an organization, versus the body of Christ. And right now, with I was part of the upcoming generation where we have always listened to podcasts and leadership talks and all these different things, and you hear all these pastors talk about, if you want to grow your organization, these are pastors. If you want to grow the institution, like we would say, Southside is, yes, the church, but the organization of Southside Baptist Church, because you have to run it, you have to have it organized in some way, shape, or form, where you have finances and this and this and this. There's a lot of things that you have to not run it like a business, but you have to run it like it's a business, because there's business elements. But I was brought up to say, as a pastor, your job is to lead the vision, teach, preach, and pray, and that's it. And then you need to, if you want to grow, you have to start thinking more like a CEO more than a mom and pop shop where you do everything. Because if you want to grow, you can only grow it beyond you. So if you want to grow your church, which there's truth to this, like if it was just Pastor Scott by himself doing everything, would the church be able to reach more people? Would the church be able to do more for the community? Or is it better to just let go and let volunteers run things and let other staff members run things to do it? So I guess my question I'm trying to figure out is, should we, where's the line? And I think this is where a lot of mega church pastors fails. Where is the line between you're the CEO of an organization trying to lead it into a direction somewhere versus, no, you're the under shepherd, you're the pastor, you're supposed to come alongside people. So where's that line?
Well, I think it's pretty plain throughout Scripture, and I don't remember exactly where the Scripture's at, but it talks about how we plant the seed and God gives the increase, right? And so if we're looking at, we got to grow the organization. We are already lost, and we should not be in ministry. Right then and there, when you go, I need to grow this organization, you're out. You should not qualify at that point, because now you're going beyond your calling. You're called to plant the seed. That's it. You just plant the seed to as many people as you can, and God provides the increase.
Right, but then you also see, though, where it says Paul planted, but Apollos watered.
Sure.
So what if you're the waterer?
So what's a planting? In that analogy, what's planting? Paul went and preached the gospel, right?
Right.
Outside of the church.
And people started...
Outside of the church.
Yeah. And people started following
and
Jesus.
People came to Christ, and then Apollos continued teaching. This is the role of the pastor, right? This is where he just teaches.
Right, because Paul was the evangelist.
Paul went out and gathered, or Paul went out and planted the seed and helped gather. There's other people that are called to go and gather. And then Apollos was specifically called to just continue to water. That's all he was called to do. He wasn't called to cultivate. He wasn't called to do anything else, just to water. And then God provided the increase. So there is specific ways lined out throughout Scripture about how things should be done. And I think that if our sole focus is to grow the organization, we've missed it. We do not deserve to be in leadership at that point. Same with this podcast. If our only goal is to grow the podcast, like, we like that the podcast is growing, but we've said it many a times, if it's 1 million listeners or if it's one listener, we're going to continue to do this as long as the Lord has called us to do it.
And I struggle with that, because I struggle with looking at the stats every week.
I mean, yeah. There are times where it's like, oh, wow, I can't believe that's happened. And it's like, to me, I look at him and go, wow, thank you, God. Thank you for using little old me, because I am nothing. And I'm so glad that your message is getting out and helping people, because, again, it's not me, it's him. I wouldn't have any wisdom or knowledge without him. We wouldn't even have the funds or the resources to be able to put on this podcast without him. So I think it's important that we remember where we came from. Pride cometh before the fall, that kind of thing. There's a couple of scriptures I wrote down on pride. I like how you got all these scriptures, and I keep pulling up mine. But Proverbs 29:23 says, a person's pride will humble him, right? But a humble spirit will gain honor. So when you start getting prideful, this is where the pride comes before the fall. Your pride's going to end up humbling you. So if you're constantly looking at stats, constantly wanting to grow your organization, at some point, it's all going to be taken away.
And it's not yours. And that's the thing that, a lot of great pastors remember the fact of, and we can talk about this, because we both follow very certain pastors. Like, I'm a very big Matt Chandler, J.D. Greer fan, Tim Keller, John Piper. The list goes on. John Stott's a big one for me too. Right. And so we have these.
And I'm a Thomas Rayner, a John Piper, those type of guys.
MacArthur.
Yeah, MacArthur, Dale Partridge. I follow.
I'm big Kevin DeYoung, and that thing's
I
like
Kevin DeYoung.
So we have these pastors that we follow, and
Sure.
and I listened to an interview that J.D. Greer did, because J.D. Greer has this podcast that's sponsored by Lifeway Leadership called Ask Me Anything.
Right.
And so people just ask Pastor J.D. questions, and he answers it.
It all stemmed off of Ask Pastor John.
It really did. And so someone asked about the celebrity pastor mindset, and being a celebrity. I think J.D. Greer's wife said it with the fact of nobody really knows you, but you're inviting everyone to be in your business, basically, and that's what it means to be a celebrity. And we follow these pastors, and I think it's not a bad thing that there are pastors who have platforms and who have names, because Jesus used Paul as a platform. Paul had a platform. Apollos had a platform. Timothy had a platform.
Platforms happen out of natural leadership and out of God's grace. The platform itself is not bad. It's what we do with the platform, our mindset.
And I would say, even how do we change because of the platform?
Where does the pride creep in on the platform?
Right. And so here's maybe the next question to go into before we start to wrap it up.
Sure.
But does the Bible say that mega churches are bad and we shouldn't want those, and rather we should go to small house churches or not? Or is that an American problem?
It does not say that. I'll give you my opinion.
Yeah, go for it.
My opinion is churches, there's two different types of growth. There's growth in numbers and growth in spirit. And I think your smaller churches, because you're more intimately connected, grow in spirit. And your mega churches, because there's so many, grow in number. And there's two different ways. So one church, a small church, the roots are an inch wide and a mile deep. And a mega church, the roots are a mile wide and an inch deep. Which one is going to survive the storm?
The one that's, a mile deep.
The roots are a mile deep, right. So those small, this is just my opinion. I think those smaller churches, because they're growing more spiritually, they're not surface deep messages. They're not, just these little Sunday morning, Wednesday night, whatever, or I'm listening to their podcast, but it's an actual growing with the tribe, which we both see the importance of that. I think they weather the storm a little bit better than members of a mega church.
Well, because you're known, Right. And I was talking with a guy last night. He was, it's really cool when you call a guy for some roofing work done, and you find out he's a Christian. And so hopefully, AJ, you're listening right now. And we had a great conversation because he goes to one of the local big churches, and he said, he's grown his faith so much at that church. He got saved in a little independent fundamental Baptist church in Missouri. He came up here. And, he said that him and his wife forced themselves to find connection and be part of a ministry. So he goes, if I would leave that church, he goes, my people would know. And he goes, he has a really strong tribe, but he goes, how many people, he was asking this question, he goes, how many people are at this church right now where if they left, ain't nobody going to know and nobody's going to care?
Right.
And that's a valid question. But I think there's a lot of good things that come out of these bigger churches that can do things that little churches can't do. Like, some of the big churches in our area, they're the ones who are doing the big food drives and the hunger drives, and they're in the schools. I've seen one big church take over an entire middle school and high school, and they're like, we're going to love the snot out of it. Can we clean the entire school? Let's get this thing ready. And so a little church can't necessarily do that, but then there's also a little church locally here in South Bend where every year they send 2 Riley kids to college for free their freshman year, and they're a small church. A small church has great opportunities too.
I was also part of a church plant, Riverside.
Yep.
Where they bought a
community center.
God gave them the old
Beacon,
the old Beacon Bowling.
Yep.
And they turned it into a community center. And they're a small. They don't have any more members than what we do here at Southside.
And they don't have a sanctuary; they have a gym. But they tear up.
All they do, they have a community. They built a community center, and that's where they have their worship on Sunday mornings. But the rest of the week, it's a community center where they serve.
And I'm here for it.
And that's a small church had decided to do that. They decided rather than paying for a building and having the expenses of just a building for just church, we're going to build a community center, and then we'll just hold church at the community center. Mm-hmm. And to me, that shows that a small church can still reach out and do impact. Yeah, exactly, because they're impacting the whole west side.
Right. And I'm one where I don't think mega churches are inherently evil either. Right. It's more of, well, what's the purpose and why are you doing what you're doing? Because, Matt Chandler, J.D. Greer, Piper,
sure.
Kevin DeYoung, all these people
sure.
have, Tim Keller
sure.
has big ministries,
mm-hmm.
but what are those ministries fighting for? They fight for that small community.
But look at the congregation.
Mm-hmm.
Don't look to the man
right
leading the congregation. Look to the congregation, because that's ultimately the pastor is supposed to be watering. How deep are their roots? How deep are their roots? Are their roots deeper in a smaller church or a bigger church? Per capita, per if you want to do percentages.
Smaller,
I think a smaller church is going to have a bigger percentage of people that have deeper roots.
Because there's a lot more ownership of it.
Correct. So that's just kind of where I stand with it. I'm not saying that mega churches are wrong. I just say I've never seen, and I can only take the mega church we have here in South Bend, Mishawaka area, GCC.
Well, there's also, but I would say Gospel City's at that level too.
Not quite. They don't have multiple campuses like GCC does. I don't think. Do they have multiple? I thought they only had one. They have two now,
and they have a church plant.
So, but what I see is I look at the roots of the congregation. I know people that go to GCC, and I don't mean to call out GCC. I'm not going to say the full name. I'm just going to say the initials. Mm-hmm. But I personally know some of the people that go there, and let me tell you, their roots are not even an inch deep. Mm-hmm. They go there to click off the checkbox. Hey, I went to church today. I'm a good person. And that's it. And then I look at people here at Southside, at people at Riverside, at these other smaller churches, and their faith is real. And that's what I'm comparing my thoughts to.
Your experience to,
right,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, so before we let it go, I want to read what the Bible says about the church and the role of a pastor.
Yeah, dive into that. And then
I'll talk about I really think this list is really cool to wrap it up from Relevant Magazine.
Go ahead. that was my final thought. I'm going to let you read this stuff to wrap it up.
Cool. So what the Bible tells about the church and the role of pastors. I got 3 passages, all from the CSB, because we love the CSB. So Acts 2:40 through 44, which these are some of my favorite verses. It says, with many words he testified, he being Peter, and strongly urged them, saying, be saved from this corrupt generation. So those who accepted his message were baptized, and that day 3,000 people were added to them. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and prayer. Everyone was filled with awe, and many wonders and signs were being performed through the apostles. Now all the believers were together and held all things in common. So what is this saying? It's the fact of, yes, 3,000 people were saved at that moment. And then, a little later in Acts, we see 5,000 people were saved.
Sure.
And so it's a large gathering, but what did they do? The role of the church is supposed to gather to study the teachings of the apostles about Jesus and the Bible, and the fellowship and the prayers and the breaking of bread. Now, I don't think they were following people to each other's house and groups of 3,000.
That's what I was going to say. I don't think this was specifically talking about the church. It was talking about, hey, these people were 3,000 people were baptized and saved that day, and then I'm assuming they went out to and got plugged into their tribes.
But this is the big one right here, and I forgot to add this one verse, but the next verse says, for verse 35, and it says, and the Lord added to their numbers daily. So what did they do? They loved each other. They studied the teachings of the apostles about Jesus. They fellowshiped together. They took communion together. They prayed together. They did life together. They had all things in common. And God added to their number.
Right.
So the role of the church is not to just sit and listen to a man speak.
Sure.
It's to gather together to grow together. 2 Timothy 4, and I have one from 1 Timothy. This is more of Paul, big pastor, trying to teach Timothy, little pastor, of like, okay, here's what your role is as a pastor. He says, I solemnly charge you before God and Christ Jesus, who is going to judge the living and the dead. Oh, that's terrifying. And because his appearing in his kingdom, preach the word. Be ready in season and out of season. Correct, rebuke, and encourage with great patience and teaching. Now, with great patience, I think that's...
I struggle with that one, because it's like, I just want to teach you, I want you to get it.
I want you to teach and go. Yeah. But, in order to do that, you got to know where people are at. Pastors got to get in the mess of their hands. And the guy I was talking to, the roofer the other day, he goes, in all honesty, we talked for maybe 45 minutes. Great spiritual conversation. He goes, honestly, I have more of a connection with you than my pastors at my church. And he goes, I'm on a hello basis, but he goes, that's what you lose when you're at a big church. And him and his wife were struggling through it. But, you have to know, as a pastor, I believe you'll be ready in season, out of season, but to rebuke, correct, come alongside with patience and teach. 1 Timothy 4, 11 through 16 says, command and teach these things. Don't let anyone despise your youth, but set an example for the believers in speech, conduct, in love, and faith, and in purity. Until I come, give your attention to public reading, exhortation, and teaching. Don't neglect the gift that is in you, which I think that's key to this, is the fact of don't neglect the gift that God gave you. So people who have like John Piper's, Matt Chandler's, these great communicators, they have a gift. So don't neglect it, but this is where it's good. It was given you through prophecy with the laying on of the hands by the council of elders. Practice these things, be committed to them, so that your progress may be evident to all. But pay close attention to your life and your teaching. Persevere in these things, for in doing this, you will save both yourself and your hearers. And I think ultimately this is why the mega church pastors that have fallen, why the little church pastors have fallen that are fallen is they don't pay close attention to their life and their teaching.
Right.
A lot of times they just focus on their teaching, but not the lives that are backing up what they're teaching. And what has happened, thankfully for me, I don't want to say Mark Driscoll's falling destroyed my faith or Perry Noble's falling destroyed my faith, but it's more the fact of it hurts to see as a pastor.
Right.
And it hurts for me to see as I followed these men and I followed their teachings. And the question is, how many other people have fallen because of it? And, J.D. Greer even said one time, he'll ask people, like, if I ever leave this church, let's say I just decide to quit and leave, or I die and it's whatever. He goes, would you stay at this church because you love this church? Or will you leave because you followed me?
Right.
And J.D. Greer says, if you answer, I'll go find someone because I just loved your teaching so much. He goes, that's a wrong answer. Yeah. And that's why I love that.
Church should never be about the building or the
pastor
or the speaker.
Like I think you should have a staff bio on your website just so people know who the people are. But I actually don't. I mean, this is something that I've thought about even with our church sign. I don't think the pastor's name should be on the church sign.
Right.
Because the name don't matter.
Right.
Jesus' name is what matters. Relevant Magazine had a really cool article. We'll put the links to Carey Nieuwhof's article and Relevance also in the magazine. But it says, why do many pastors fail? The first reason was being a pastor is more pressure than you could imagine. Being a pastor is lonely is number 2. And last, being a pastor is an ego drug. And they said that's ultimately why people fall. And then, someone asked a question. This was featured in Carey Nieuwhof's article of, okay, so we have some of these pastors like, Grishel, Warren, Stanley, they haven't had moral failures. They haven't gone into alcoholism. They stay humble and do what they're supposed to do. How did they do it? How did Billy Graham do it? And they, in the Relevant magazine, it actually said, just because someone does it doesn't just because it's a description doesn't mean it's a prescription,
Right.
Just because you can go on the court and shoot 4 threes in a row doesn't make you Steph Curry.
Right.
Like Steph Curry. Just because you can do this doesn't make you Michael Jordan, doesn't make you this person. It just means, oh, cool, you did it. It's just what happened. But, if someone asks the question, okay, so Billy Graham, why did Billy Graham finish well? This is a man who had a public platform with
presidents,
4 presidents, 3 presidents. He flew private jets with them. He had the biggest gatherings of all time. He had people coming down in droves.
He broke the racial profile when it wasn't even popular.
Oh my goodness,
he was the one that
unreal.
said, "No, we're not going to have segregation here. You're going to sit together." And people didn't like that. And some people were
everyone from tribe, nation, tongue, gender didn't matter. He's like, the gospel is for everyone. He preached Jesus hard. Well, so why did Billy Graham finish well? And most people know the main Billy Graham rule, which is just never be alone with someone of the opposite sex, and that's where they stop. But there's actually 4 principles.
All right, let's
Number
see.
1, he had financial integrity. Billy Graham and his team would not raise money themselves at crusades. He never touched the money. Number 2, he had sexual integrity. Number 3, he had respect for the local churches. And number 4, a commitment to accuracy in reporting. So they would never exaggerate how many people actually showed up and gave their lives and all these different things. But ultimately, why did Billy Graham not fail? In that documentary that both you and I watched,
I love that.
He fell on his face and prayed every day. And he said,
fasted and prayed.
And he's like, God, this is not my ministry. Keep me humble and make this about you. And I think that's why so many pastors honestly fail, is they see the limelight in the pat on the backs and the friendships. We've seen a lot of pastors, embezzle money or live these outlandish lifestyles because at the end of the day, their ego got too big for them. And just like we started off the episode where Carey Nieuwhof said it's too easy for our platforms to outgrow our character. And that's where the danger lies. And to end the conversation, I think so many of us look at those pastors and be like, oh, I can't believe you failed.
Right.
But we don't turn and look at us,
at
ourselves and go, I'm one decision away from falling just like these guys do. And they just had a public platform, so it was a public fall.
Right.
But
I could fall just as easily.
You could fall just as easily. One stupid
solitude,
decision.
You could fall in solitude or you could fall in the public light.
And it's true. And so it's like, there's a pressure that we can't imagine. As a Christian, if you find yourself as a lonely, bored Christian, you're going to make some really dumb decisions. And if your ego gets too big, you're going to make decisions that you'll always regret. So, why do mega church pastors fail? It's because they're human, just like us.
And they don't have checks and balances.
And that's why we, as little peoples who don't have platforms, we need checks and balances. We need friends. We need people that are, the Apostle Paul even said, God gave me this to humble me.
Yep.
Maybe we should pray that prayer too, because like the dangerous prayer, seek my heart and know my wicked thoughts, know my thoughts and see if there's any wicked way in me and lead me in the way everlasting.
Proverbs 130 or Psalms 139.
I think so. Yeah, at the end of Psalms 139.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to read when we're done podcasting.
All right.
But any last thoughts before we close this out and get to fun facts?
No, man, that was a good way to end the episode.
All right, let's do it.
Time for Fun Facts with Fuller.
All right, give it to us, my dude. What's the fun fact for the day?
Well, I look very red right now. Look at my. Sorry, I just.
Wow, you do look really red on camera.
I caught a glimpse of myself. I'm like, wow, I'm not even hot or anything. I don't.
You're always hot.
Anyways, so fun fact of the day, Mark and listeners, did you know cherophobia is the irrational fear of fun or happiness? People with this phobia tend to avoid any kind of situation that others might classify as fun or joyful. The word cherophobia is made up of the Greek words chero, meaning to rejoice, and phobia, meaning fear. For any listeners out there with cherophobia, please stop listening to these fun facts now. We can't imagine the psychological pain you've gone through by listening to these already.
Did you just dad joke the fun fact?
I did.
Oh, goodness. Well, that was a fun fact. The fear of...
Cherophobia, the fear of fun.
Yeah, no, we don't have that fear.
No,
we have
not at
way
all.
too much fun on this episode.
We
And we hope
definitely
you
do.
guys had fun with this episode as well and all the other ones. Just like always, if you listen to Apple Podcasts or if you just want to be awesome and download Apple Podcasts and just leave a review, we would be most grateful for that. But just like always, you can get all of our information over at realtalkchristianpodcast.com, where you can get our email address, the phone number, links to social medias, and listen to so many other episodes. Always check out the show notes for all the links that we've mentioned, and hey, maybe even some other episodes that you may enjoy. Anything else we got to say before we go?
No, just don't forget Christmas is coming up. If you haven't already ordered a Christmas gift for your loved ones, the CS Bible, CSB, is always a great Christmas gift. It's what we use here on the podcast.
Yep.
And yeah, they're always running good specials.
And be on the lookout for our Christmas giveavay.
Oh, yeah.
I love it.
We'll let
hey,
you know how to do it.
I love it. But until next time, guys.
Take it easy.